Would you please help us welcome our speaker for this evening, Kat B. from the Active Group in Pawtucket, Rhode Island.
Hi, my name is Kat and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Kat.
Grateful to be here. It's been a while since I've been to an in-person meeting. So yeah, this feels good. Hey. Like I was talking to Carly outside, and I like somehow made the speaking time a lot shorter, and then like in my head I was like, oh, it's like a 30-minute speaker meeting, and then I was like, oh, it's 15 minutes, and then before I got here I like checked my messages and I was like, oh, it's 50 minutes. Like, oh man. So we're gonna try to do the long version, but yeah, it feels good to be out and be amongst other, recovering alcoholics. I came in kind of young. I've been sober since I was 22. I came in when I was 21, and I'm one of those cases, like, I did not intend to get sober. AA got me 100%. Like, I did not think that this would work. I had no faith in any of it. And I came in here on an ultimatum, and I've been here ever since. I celebrated 11 years in June, and like AA's tricked me into living a life. It's a pretty amazing thing. I knew I was an alcoholic from a really early age. It was no shock to me at all. I grew up in a home with a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol. My father was an addict and an alcoholic, and we just grew up in the utter chaos of a home led by an addict and an alcoholic. You never really knew what you were coming home to, and there were times that we were removed from the home, me and my sisters, and sometimes we were together, sometimes we were separated, and sometimes we knew we were going to be removed, sometimes we didn't, and sometimes we knew who we were going to, sometimes we had no idea, and so like all of these circumstances like made me just like this incredibly fearful kid, and I'm not saying like I am an alcoholic because of my childhood. It might have like sped the timetable up a little bit because I was exposed earlier, but I have two sisters and neither of them are alcoholics, and they had the same parents and the same childhood. So I don't know why I'm an alcoholic, but I just want to say that it's not because of that, because when I came in here I really wanted to pin it on something. I really wanted to be like, oh, my dad made me an alcoholic, my childhood made me an alcoholic, this made me that made me an alcoholic, taking zero responsibility for myself, right? Because that's what I really want to do. I want to pin it on everything else, and so that didn't make me an alcoholic, and like I said, like I have two sisters, neither of them are. My older sister does this thing where she does like wine tastings, and it's the most infuriating thing to me, right? Because they go on these wine tastings and like they swirl it, they sniff it, they sip it, and then they spit it out, right? Like they don't even drink the effing wine, And I'm like, I don't get it. I just don't get it, right? But she's not an alcoholic. She does that. She'll have like a glass of wine and not finish it, right? Blows my mind. But all of these things to say, like, I had this really crummy childhood. I was very full of fear, and fear has marked me for my entire life. Like, I am just a very fearful person. To this day, at like 11 years sober, like I'm a very fearful person, and I have to work really hard to overcome that in different ways, And like alcohol was just around. It was around. It was prevalent. Like my dad would drink J&B scotch, and if you know what that is, it comes in like these little green cardboard boxes, right? And I remember like there would be so many of them that my sisters and I would build forts with these boxes, like there were so many of them. And when we were kids, it was like if we would get sick, we would get this concoction, and it was like tea, milk, and some, like a little bit of whiskey. And my sisters hated it. They like hated that concoction. I loved it. Like I would fake being sick so I could get the tea, And so like from a really early age, I knew I reacted differently than the normal folk. Like I knew there was something different about me. And I started drinking on a regular basis by the time I was 12 or 13. And soon after that, I became addicted to my drug of choice. And that was another thing, when I came in here, I didn't really know how to handle. Like, I didn't know how to identify. And I want to be really clear that I am not telling anybody how to identify in this program. I truly believe that is a very personal decision that only you can make, right? I'll just tell you how I came to identify as an alcoholic, you know, and you know, and it came by, at first people would just tell me, you're an AA, you identify as an alcoholic. And at first that was fine, but then I really wanted to understand why I have to identify as an alcoholic. And for me, like, when I look back at the way that I drank and the way that I drugged, for me, there was a difference. You know, like, I know for a fact that I can go out now and I can get my drug of choice. And before I even put that drug in my body, I am not suiting up or showing up for absolutely anything for a bare minimum of 3 days, right? And I know that now. Whereas alcohol does this crazy thing with my brain, where it makes me believe that I can get in my car, I can drive to a bar, I can have one drink, I can be wonderfully social, you know, I can drive home, I can go to bed, I can wake up, I can go to work the next morning, and everything will be hunky-dory, you know. And that has literally never happened to me, right? Like, that has never happened to me. But alcohol makes me believe that is a distinct possibility. That will happen this time, you know. I have a body that craves more and a mind that tells me it will be different this time, every single time, you know. And so I came to identify as an alcoholic because alcohol warps my reality, you know. It warps how I viewed the past, how I viewed the future, how I viewed the present. You know, it messes with me to this degree that drugs just don't do. And so that is why I identify as an alcoholic. And I didn't have, you know, like, I didn't have a whole lot of really big jackpots. For a while I thought it was because I got sober really young, and then, like, I ran into a whole lot of other young people that have, like, really big jackpots. So I can't really use that as an excuse. I just didn't lose a lot of things. Like, I didn't have a lot to lose, you know. I went to school and I did pretty well. You know, I played a sport. I was really good at it. I got a scholarship to a high school to play that sport. When I graduated, I was a 3-sport letterman, and I had a scholarship to play in college. And I turned 18 my senior year, and I promptly got arrested, and I lost the scholarship, right? So I can say, like, that's the one thing that I lost. Like, I feel like I lost an education. I did still end up going to school. I just played at a different division. So it really isn't like this, like, sob story. I still played, I still went, and I could only make it through, and barely, I'm talking barely made it through one season until my body physically started falling apart, right? Like, I was constantly in, like, the abdominal pain. I was, like, vomiting blood. I couldn't make it. My dorm room was across the hall from the bathroom, and I could not walk across the hall to brush my teeth, to shower, to do, like, basic hygiene. I couldn't do it. By the end of it, I was just, like, barricaded in this cement room, and I couldn't come out. And like, I remember my mom coming up. They called, like, wellness checks on me all the time. And the thing about wellness checks, if you just tell them that you're fine, they just go away. Like, they don't do anything. So I just kept being like, yeah, I'm fine, and just not showing up for anything. And eventually my mom came, and you know, she's easily one of the strongest women that I know, right? Like, she, like, managed to, like, get all of us back under her roof. And then, you know, it's like, I did not get where I was in a vacuum, right? My mom worked her butt off to get me all those opportunities. Like, I was not, like, born an athlete. Like, my mother worked 3 jobs to get me the gear, to get me the camps, to get me the coaches, to get me that opportunity that I was blowing at that moment, right? And so I remember sitting on the stoop outside of the dorm room explaining to her that I was going to be dropping out of college, and I remember her bawling and crying, right? And in that moment, she is bawling, crying, and all I could feel was relief, you know? And it's just that, like, that level of self-centeredness, right? Like, that, like, her pain doesn't impact me because all I can see is me. Like, my world gets exactly cat-sized. There is no room for anybody else in there. And, you know, and somebody explained to me the difference between selfishness and self-centeredness, and I say it when I speak because I think, to me, it was, like, really impactful. And he said it's like you're at a party and there's a plate of cookies and there's one cookie left, right? And selfishness is like, I know that you want the cookie, but I take it anyways because I want it, right? And that's selfish, right? Self-centeredness is like, there's one cookie left, and it doesn't even occur to me that anybody else might want the cookie. All I can see is that I want the cookie, right? And that is me, right? I don't even see anybody else. Like I said, my world is exactly cat-sized, you know, and that's what it was in that moment. Like my mother was devastated, and I was just like, I'm just gonna get this institution off my back. I'm gonna get these coaches off my, like I can drink the way that I want to drink. I can drug the way that I want to drug, and like everything will be okay. Like it was all bright horizons from there, right? That is all I wanted. And so I moved in with my poor mother, and I made her life hell. Right, I made her life absolute hell. And you know, my last big run, I was living with her in Seekonk, Massachusetts, and I had stolen a car. I'd driven up to Boston, and I somehow ended up squatting in a house in Cape Cod. And I don't know what happened between Boston and Cape Cod. It's just like this black hole. Like I have no idea what prompted me to go there. I don't know how I got there. But I came to in a house in Cape Cod. I had an abscess in my arm. I had shingles down my back, which was happening quite a bit at that time. The whites in my eyes were turning yellow, and I was incredibly underweight, right? And once again, that self-centeredness, right? All I could think is like, why is everyone so concerned, you know? And I know that people can relate to that, because I've heard so many of us say it over and over again, like, why is everyone so concerned? Like, our world becomes so dangerously small. Like, here I am decaying in this house, and I'm like, if they should be doing just fine, if not better, without me, right? And genuinely believing that. And the scariest part about the alcoholic self-centeredness to me is that I don't need alcohol to have it, right? Like, I can be that self-centered in sobriety, which is terrifying, right? Because not only do I not have alcohol, like, I'm just a raging jerk, right? And I don't have alcohol to blame it on. Because what happens to me when you take away alcohol, I'm still left with me. I'm still left with an alcoholic, right? And I have to work every day. I have to do these things every single day to not be a jerk, right? Like, it is a daily practice for me. You know, and like, in some people, it might not be daily, it might be weekly. For me, it is absolutely 100% daily, you know. Yeah, so come to in the house in Cape Cod, my older sister, who did a lot in raising me, you know, she was basically, you know, we all have that person, I think. She was like my caretaker. Like, she was never my older sister. She was like my keeper, you know. She was like the call from jail. She was the mess cleaner. She was like, I'm lost. I don't know where I am. Come pick me up. I'm somewhere in Connecticut. She was that person, you know. And she came and got me, and she gave me an ultimatum that saved my life. She told me that I could either get help or I could no longer contact my family, right? She told me that, you know, I was dead to her. She had lost her little sister a long time ago. I was no longer that person, you know, so she really didn't care what I chose, but I had to choose one. She said that she was sick and tired. She had like a whole monologue, right? She was sick and tired of consoling my inconsolable mother. She was sick and tired of explaining to my younger sister what she had no right understanding. And she was sick and tired of being the person to clean up all my messes. You know, she was done. And so at that point, I chose to get help, not because I thought there was help to get. You know, like I said, my father was an addict and an alcoholic, and I watched him bounce in and out of halls just like this one my entire life, right? AA and NA and CA and sober houses and rehabs and inpatients and outpatients and you name it. Like, trips to Gosnell were like a family vacation, right? I grew up in Norton. We would like throw everyone in the car. Dad's going to Gosnell. We would like stop and get a tuna melt or something, and you know, drop him off. And you know, so he never really could get any time. It was like maybe 3 months, maybe. And he ended up dying of an overdose when I was 16. And I knew I had what he had. Like, I knew it from a really early age. I knew I had what he had, and I knew that there was no help. Like, I watched there be no help. You know, I'd watched all of these things fail my entire life, and that was my truth at that time, right? And I'm not here to like take his inventory. I don't know his path, but I know mine, and for me, obviously, it has led me to this life beyond my wildest dreams, which I'll get to. But at that moment, I just didn't believe that there was any help or any hope. And so when I chose to get help, it was because it was the absolute last option that I had. You know, I couldn't lose my family. I was 21, my family, they fed me, they clothed me, they put a roof over my head, and I could not do a single one of those things on my own, you know. And it was also like, at the end of a long run, how exhausted you are. Like, I just didn't have any fight left. It had all been stripped from me. So when she gave me this ultimatum, I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I knew I couldn't do it without that kind of help. And I just didn't have the fight to say no, which some might say was like God coming into my life at that moment, taking that fight away from me. And it was miraculous. I ended up saying that I would get help. I ended up going to a program in Providence, and I really wish that I could tell you that I've been sober ever since, because that would be like really neat and tidy. But that is not the way my story goes, right? Like, I went to this program and I remember nothing from it. I don't remember anything from the program. I do know that when I left, they gave me Antabuse, which I was pretty sure was the cure, right? They give you know what Antabuse is. And they explained this to me, you take it in the morning, and if you drink, you will get violently ill, so you won't drink, right? That's like, I thought, I will just take it in the morning. I know if I drink, I will get violently ill, so I will not drink, as if my mind works like a normal person, right? I overestimate myself all the time. That is not what happened, right? Antabuse worked for maybe 3 days, and then by day 4, I was drinking and violently ill by like late afternoon. And I drank on Antabuse over and over and over again. And every morning when I took it, it was with the full intent to not drink that day. Like, I didn't take Antabuse thinking like, oh, this is gonna be fun, I'm gonna like horribly ruin my stomach in a few hours. It was with the full intent to not drink that day. And to me that to me is like the epitome of why I need AA, right? Because if you take away the only coping mechanisms I've ever known in my entire life, you take away drugs, you take away alcohol, and you don't give me something to replace that, like, you don't give me like the spiritual principles that are laid out in this, right? Whether you want to call it a spiritual awakening or a personality change or whatever you want to call it, if you don't give me that, you don't give me a higher power, you don't give me a sponsor just to tell me like which way is up and like where the bathrooms are, you don't give me this fellowship, like stories like yours, people like you, I can't do it, I'm like an exposed nerve. Life is overwhelming and absolutely everything hurts, I can't do this world on my own. And, I'm lucky at that time, when I'd gotten out of that program, I was drinking on Antabuse, and I had this old high school teacher come back into my life, and he and my mom had kept in touch since I was in high school. He had kind of become like this like surrogate father figure, and in high school I really didn't like him that much. Like, he would say things that really irritated me, like, Kat, you're allergic to alcohol, you break out in handcuffs. And I was like, who talks like that, But it's like a saying around here. Like, he would like spout these sayings, and I remember being like, Jason just like says the weirdest stuff. And I come in here and I'm like, oh, it's all these things, like all the things that you see on banners. He was just like parroting. But now I'm like, I'm extremely grateful for that man. Like, he and his wife started taking me to meetings, and I did absolutely everything wrong. And it's one of my favorite parts of Alcoholics Anonymous, aside from like the miracle of sobriety and recovery, right? Is that you can come in here and you can do absolutely everything wrong, and there will still be someone at that door saying, welcome next time you come, That is miraculous to me, and it happens uniquely in places like this. Like, if I go to work and I do absolutely everything wrong, like, no one is welcoming me back into that building, like, it's not happening. And that's the thing, is like the only thing that I did right was I kept coming, and sometimes it was like I was dragged. But I'm really grateful for that. I'm also grateful for the way that Jason and his wife introduced me to AA, right? They took me and it was no pressure. They would take me to these meetings, and they weren't like, you have to sit up front, you have to do this, you have to do that. They were just like, all right, you want to sit in the back and be a tough guy? That's fine, go ahead. I'm going to sit up front. And so they led by example, which was really beautiful. Because I really did do everything wrong. I sat in the back, I came late, I left early, I treated it like speed dating, I don't know if anybody has ever had, no one experienced that. But that's what I did when I came in, and that's what it was about, that's what motivated me. And, I used to say that I had poison ivy on my hands during the prayer, back when we would hold hands during prayers. because I didn't want to hold anyone's hand. I didn't want that much touching. And what ended up happening was like people put their arms around me, which was like way worse. But like I had all these plans about how I was going to distance me and everybody else, you know. And I remember there was one meeting that I actually answered a phone call like in the meeting. Like I was rude, you know. Yeah, I was rude. And I disrespected AA, and I didn't respect anybody in here. Like I didn't want what you had because I didn't think it was real, you know. And when people would talk about a life beyond their wildest dreams, I was like, I don't, you know, I see like a Camry in the parking lot. Like nobody's living a life beyond their wildest dreams, you know. And you know, but that's the thing. I was framing it all wrong, right? When I believe I have a life beyond my wildest dreams today, you know. I drive a Subaru, to be clear. Like I'm not like swimming in it, but I have a life beyond my wildest dreams because my dreams were so small, you know. Like I didn't think I was gonna live past 25, you know. I'm 33, you know. I didn't think I didn't think I could have a career. Like I went back to school twice. I got 2 degrees, you know. I got a career, you know. I have a family, you know. It's beyond my wildest dreams because my dreams were so small. You know, I couldn't have dreamt this for myself. You know, and you know, and eventually, obviously, I started doing things right in AA, right? What happened was, I feel like AA has tricked me along the way into doing things right. Either that or I'm like so slow on the uptake, like I don't see that it's happening, and then I look back and I'm like, oh my God, it got me. You know, what happened was, you know, I was coming in, and I was going to meetings, and this girl, she only had a few months, but you know, I had a car and she didn't, and she was like, can you drive me to meetings? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so before I knew it, I was going to like a meeting every night because this girl was going to a meeting every night, you know. And then she was like, oh, I gotta meet my sponsor, will you know, give me a ride? So really I got tricked into AA because this girl needed rides everywhere, right? And before I knew it, like I was going to a meeting a night, I had a sponsor, I was going through steps with this girl, right? And her sponsor, and I had a home group, and I had a job in the home group, and I looked back and I was like, oh my God, I'm like doing AA, you know? And that girl is like still my best friend to this day, right? She like picked me, and it's been beautiful ever since. You know, and so eventually I started doing things right, and you know, and I remember when I first was coming in, it was like, I really believed like all fun was dead, right? I don't know if anybody else has that experience where like they walk into a church basement on a Friday night and they believe that their life is over. That was my experience, right? I walked into a church basement in Pawtucket on a Friday night and I was like, all fun is dead forever. Like this is it, you know? And that's absolutely not been my experience, right? I've had so much fun in AA, right? And I get so distracted by the fun, I don't realize that I'm learning how to build a life outside of AA, right? And that's the beautiful part. I feel like the beautiful part for me, there are so many beautiful parts, but the beautiful part for me is that I do get tricked into these things because I will not do it on my own. I have to be tricked. And by like calling my sponsor every day when I first came in, it taught me how to pick up the phone, right? Like before I came in, I couldn't order food. Like I couldn't call the pizza place and order a pizza. Like that was way too terrifying to me. I couldn't do it, you know? And when my sponsor was having me do that, I started to get over this fear, which seems really mundane and small and stupid. But then when my first job came along in sobriety, which was a receptionist, you know, like I had to pick up the phone, and I was able to do that, you know. I learned how to suit up and show up in here, right? I got a home group and they told me that I had to be there and at a certain time, do a certain job, perform that duty, be there the whole time, be reliable, be accountable. And I started to do that, you know, and then I was able to take that outside of AA, and I was able to do that at my job and do that with my family, and do that in my relationships, and I like was able to build these little pockets outside of AA, right? It was this really beautiful thing, you know, and eventually, like in sobriety, you know, I have a lot of cash and prizes, I feel like today, like because of sobriety. But if you take away all the cash and prizes, like you take away the relationship, you take away the car, you take away the house, you take away the family, you take away all of that, the best part is, like I have all that inside stuff back. Because while I didn't have all these big jackpots, I didn't lose a whole lot of stuff, I didn't lose a house, a car, kids, I didn't lose any of that stuff. I lost inside stuff, right? Like, like I remember at one of my first meetings, this gentleman sharing, and he shared about like these horrific losses that he had, right? He had like a lot of jackpots. You know, like he lost his house, he lost his cars, he lost his wife. And I remember particularly how he phrased this. He said, I cracked up 4 cars. And I remember sitting there when I was 21 and I was like, how on earth did you get 4 cars, sir? You know, like how did you buy a house? How did you convince someone to marry you? You know, like these are real questions, because I didn't lose any of those things, you know. But in that same meeting when I heard about, you know, praying to not wake up before you went to bed at night, like I felt that, you know. Or like, I remember some guy talking about how like he absolutely hated what he saw when he looked in the mirror. And it was like it wrapped words around feelings that I never knew how to express, you know. And it was the first kind of shedding of terminal uniqueness was when I would hear that stuff. Because what I lost was the inside stuff. I lost self-worth, self-respect, any sense of personal safety. Like those are the things that I lost. And those are the core things today that I have back, right? Like I have self-respect, I have self-worth, I have a sense of personal safety, you know. Those are the things that I have. If you take all the cash and prizes and put them aside, those are the core things that I cannot lose as long as I continue to do these things. Everything else can fall by the wayside. But as long as I continue to do these things that are outlined here, that's going to stay in me, you know. And to me, that's the most important part. Like my skin fits today. I never felt like that before, you know. And I've done a lot of cool things in sobriety. You know, I was on different committees. You know, I learned service work. And it's funny, like I serve on some boards outside of AA now, and I remember the first time I showed up to a board meeting, right? And one of the guys was like, "Oh, do you know like Robert's Rules of Order?" And I was like, "Yes, do you?" Because I thought it was an AA thing. I thought like Robert's Rules of Order were just AA. They're not, you know? Like that's something like people use like in the outside world. So I went into this board meeting and I was like, is this guy in AA? Like, oh my gosh, you know. He wasn't. He was like a businessman, like that's like very, you know. And luckily I didn't totally blow my cover, but I was like, yes, you know. And now like I know Robert's Rules of Order inside and out, like from serving on all of these committees, you know, committees where we're arguing over Robert's Rules of Order, you know, and now I get to go to a board meeting and I'm like very well prepared and I can sit there and I can hold my own because AA gave me this ridiculous scaffolding for the outside world, you know. But I've also had like plenty of failures in sobriety. Like just because I get sober doesn't mean everything's like hunky-dory for the rest of my life. That has not been my experience. You know, I've fallen on my face plenty of times in sobriety, inside and outside these halls. Like one thing was I remember hearing everyone talk about like going back to school and getting straight A's. Like I don't know if you've heard this narrative where like they're like, you know, I got sober, I went back to school, I got straight A's. It was great, you know. So I was like, awesome, I'll go back to school, get straight A's, I'll get this career that I believe is owed to me, right? Because I have this sense of entitlement whether or not I'm drinking. I'm like, I'm sober, you're welcome, give me my life, you know. And you know, so I went back to school and I failed. Like I failed like I lived in Ecuador for like a year and a half. I failed Spanish. Like I speak Spanish. I failed Spanish, you know. And it was this realization, or not even a realization, this like in my face moment where you know, I still have to like do these things in the outside world. I still have to like show up and suit up. In order to do well in school, I have to go to school. You know, like I have to go to class. I have to do the homework. You know, but like I have this like this entitlement, or I try not to now. I definitely had it in the beginning, this entitlement. And you know what? Like I failed, and I ended up going back to school, and I did a little better. And then I got my degree, and I got another degree, and I got a career, and I have that career. But I worked really hard for it. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. Is like none of that was handed to me just because I was sober, just because I believed it should be handed to me because I was sober. Because I was doing this work in here, I thought that the world owed me something, and it doesn't. You know. And I work really hard for the relationships with my family. You know, my older sister was really quick to forgive me. My younger sister was not, you know. She still harbors, it's 11 years and she's still really bitter. And you know what, she doesn't owe me forgiveness. That's the other thing. Like, I can do a living amends, I can do all the right things. She does not owe me that. She can stay mad as long as she wants to. I continue to make that living amends to her, you know, and I hope that someday she won't stay mad, you know, but that is not owed to me, you know. And today, like, I have like, you know that saying, like, I have problems in areas where I didn't have areas? Like, that's what I have today, right? Like, I have these relationships that are really beautiful, and I have these responsibilities that are really crushing, you know? And I get to show up and suit up and live up to them, you know? Like, my mother today, like, she doesn't have to worry about me. She can just be a mom. My sister can just be a sister, you know? My older sister, when she used to call me, like, if I would miss a call from my older sister, I would miss like 50 calls. I don't know if you guys can relate to that. Like, they just think that you're dead in a ditch somewhere, so they just keep calling you. And so I would miss like 50 calls from her because she would assume that something was horribly wrong. Today, when I miss a call from her, like, I miss one call. I don't take up that space in her mind anymore. You know, I don't take up I don't take her serenity, you know, and she just gets to be a sister. And I get to be a sister and a daughter and a wife and a mother, and I get to be all of these things, you know. And it's, gosh, it's only 7:38. But it's awesome. It's awesome that I get to do this stuff, you know. And yeah, man, I just had a kid. I had a kid 6 weeks ago, which, like, is utter chaos. I don't know if anybody has kids. I did not know what I was getting into. You know, I had this whole romanticized image of what parenthood and motherhood was going to be. It is nuts, right? And it's really stressful. And I don't transition well. I don't know if anyone can relate to that. Like, when I came into AA, I remember thinking I had this image of myself, like I was this really laid back, chill person. And then I did the steps, and I'm not. Like, that was like one of these like realizations that I had, you know. Like, I remember distinctly, like, going through my fifth step with my sponsor and her being like, yeah, wow, you're pretty high strung. Like, this is, you know, and it carries through. Like, that's not something I just shed, right? Like, I believe in timetables, you know, like, I believe that there is a timetable. Whether or not you know about it, it's there, you know, and that's, like, prevalent in my relationship. Like, I have this whole other reality going on in my head, and he's like, I didn't know we had to do this today, you know, like, and I was like, of course we have to do it today, you know, because I have this whole other narrative in my head. And, you know, so I like thought that I was really laid back, and I'm not really laid back. And that translates into, like, I do not transition well, right? And I have to lean really heavily on this program for all of these things. Every transition that I've had in AA, I've leaned really heavily on this program. You know, I don't just use AA for, like, alcohol-related things. I almost barely use it for alcohol-related things anymore. Like, alcohol doesn't actually come up in my regular life very often, if at all. You know, I use AA for the life things. And what I found is there is not a single thing that I can go through in my life that somebody in here has not gone through and stayed sober doing it, you know. And so when I, you know, had my daughter 6 weeks ago, I have this, like, committee of women, like, we all kind of got sober around the same time, and we've just kind of, like, gone through these life changes, like, almost tandem, you know. And so, like, all of these ladies had a kid a year ago, almost exactly, and so literally, like, they just went through it, and so I can just siphon off what they've already done, you know. I don't have to, like, blaze a path all my own, you know. If it's hard, like, I can absolutely just lean on this program every single time, you know, and it has never failed me, you know. And, like, man, I'm thinking about transitions and, like, the difficulties that happen in sobriety, which there are plenty of, right? Like, we don't get sober and, you know, it's all like puppy dogs and rainbows, and there are plenty of those moments. Like, I've had so much fun in sobriety. I've met my best friends in here. I met my husband in here, you know. But there are plenty of, like, horrible moments too. Like, if we're all in here, we've all lost someone. Like, there's just no way to get around it. And I remember there was, you know, 4 years ago, my best friend relapsed, overdosed, and died, and it was horrific. Right, it was horrific to me because I didn't even know that she had relapsed. like we had been talking, and I knew something was wrong. And I remember, like, I wasn't married to my husband at the time, but I remember turning to him and being like, something's going on with her. You know, I don't know if like she's bipolar. Like in my head, I knew something was going on. I was like, there are these like crazy changes that are happening, and it never occurred to me that she had gone out. It never even occurred to me, because it was something that like happens so tangentially in my mind. You know, it wouldn't happen to like my core crew. And so when she went out and she died, it like rocked my world. You know, I was shook, and like AA has driven into me like this schedule, right? Like my and I'm gonna blow up my own spot here, because my home group is a Friday night home group, right? It's in Pawtucket on Friday nights, and I am not in Pawtucket on a Friday night. But on Friday nights, you can usually find me in a church basement in Pawtucket, and that is where I have been for the past 11 years. You know, on Friday nights I'm at Active. You know, on Thursday nights I am at Ticket. On Monday, you know, I have my schedule. So when Lily died, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know where to turn, I autopiloted. Like, I go to Pawtucket on Friday night, and I went to Pawtucket on Friday night, and it was this crew of people, and like, thank God for that. Thank God AA has absolutely like beaten into me this like this pattern, right? Because when I'm in these periods of transitions and I absolutely short circuit and I don't know what to do with myself, I just go on autopilot, you know, and I do the things that AA has taught me, and I get to live this life beyond my wildest dreams. Yeah, and I get to like build these relationships, and I get to admit when I'm wrong, and I get to make things right, and I get to make amends, and I get to work on things that I didn't want to work on or didn't know that I had to work on, you know. I get to work on being flexible, and it's not a strike for me. I get to work on transitions. I get to admit that I'm not perfect, you know. I spoke at a Zoom meeting, and it was like topic, and I chose transitions as a topic, and every single person talked about how like, you know, they were really bad at transitions when they first got sober, and now they're really good at them. And I was like, how? You know, I was really bad at transitions, and I'm still really bad at transitions. Like, how do you like get better at them? I guess I'm outwardly less bad, right? Like, it's still really hard on the inside. And I think that's the thing about like all of these defects of character for me. Like, they don't necessarily go away. They just change how they outwardly appear. Like, I don't have to intrude on other people's lives with my character defects anymore, right? I've learned how to deal with them in a different way. You know, some of these character defects I have shed, luckily, you know, but some of them are like so internalized to me that I just have to deal with them differently. I have to cope with them differently. And I want to make sure that I don't intrude on other people. Like, I don't want to take space that I'm not allotted. You know, I don't want to keep people up at night. I don't want to hurt feelings unintentionally, like, or intentionally. I don't want to hurt feelings, you know. I try to be a better person every day, and you know, yeah, that's my goal, to be a better person every single day, a better person than I was yesterday, and I fail at it on a very regular basis, you know, and you know, I'm looking down like the barrel of parenthood, and I'm thinking of the permanency of it, and it is terrifying. You know, it's terrifying to be like, I'm molding a human, you know. Hopefully I do well, you know, and hopefully I create a good one, you know, and you know, it's such a wonderful thing, because I get to have this partner today that I can lean on. You know, he's home with this infant, and so that I can be here, and it's really beautiful, like, that we get to parent together and we have these conversations, and you know, we don't necessarily have these like huge arguments. You know, when we disagree about things, like, we have disagreements, we have conversations. My relationships before I got sober, or even like in early sobriety, were pretty sick. You know, like, I don't put down the drink and then get well. I feel like that's been the moral of this whole story, right? I feel like I've just been telling you all the things that I do really horribly in sober. But you know, eventually I get better at it. But you know, in early sobriety and before I got sober, I had like really dysfunctional relationships, and it makes sense. Like, those were the only relationships I'd ever seen. I was a dysfunctional person. You know, water seeks its own level, and today it's amazing when I look at my relationship, and it's not perfect. He's not perfect. I'm not perfect. But we have like a really beautiful relationship where we can disagree and like actually have a conversation about it. You know, and I'm not like smashing a plate in his face or something like that, you know. You know, it's wonderful. And I get to go to a job today that I don't hate. And it's funny, like I live in the suburbs. Like I have this job that I have this life that I would never assume that I would have had. Like if you had put it to me 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and said like, this is where you're gonna live, this is who you're gonna live with, this is what you're gonna do, I would have been like, no. Like, no, I'm not. I like assumed I was gonna be like living in a commune in New Mexico or something. You know, doing art, and like that is not what I do. You know, I do like the farthest thing from that, and like I live in the suburbs. You know, like I drive a Subaru, I have a kid, I have a dog, I have a cat. You know, I have like this very like picturesque little life. It almost seems like, you know, and that is not where I would have imagined myself. And I think that's where the life beyond wildest dreams comes from, right? Like it's not what I would have imagined myself, but gosh, I love it. You know. Like I get to come home and I feel completely comfortable in my home. I had never felt comfortable in my home before, you know. I feel comfortable in my skin today. I had never felt comfortable in my skin before AA, and even into AA. It took a lot of work. It took these steps, you know, it took sponsoring and sponsors, you know, and the fellowship. The fellowship guides me through absolutely everything. And I believe it's like for me, it's like one of the most important parts of AA. I feel like I say that about everything in AA. It's like one of the most important parts. Then like list all of the parts of AA, right? But like the fellowship is what got me in here. You know, when I came in and I started to have fun, and I realized that I could have fun in sobriety. I remember going to the young people's meeting, like 3 locations ago, the young people's meeting in Providence, and I like pulled in. And first of all, I like saw just like this like group of smokers, and I was like, nope, and like pulled out. Not because I wasn't a smoker, because I didn't want to walk through this like group of like tattooed dudes that were like very terrifying. But when I finally did make it in there, I remember distinctly asking like, what do you guys do for fun? And I remember this guy being like, yeah, like we do a lot of bowling. And I remember being like, bowling? Like that's what I'm gonna do? And I have to say, like I have done a lot of bowling. And I've done so much bowling in sobriety. And I've had so much fun doing it. Like, I have never gotten any better, which has been obviously another like theme throughout my share. Because like I don't really get that much better, but I have more and more fun doing it, you know. And I've gotten to grow up in here. You know, I've had the absolute honor and privilege of growing up in AA. You know, I went from like a disrespectful 22-year-old to like a decently respectful and respectable 33-year-old today. You know, I have no plans on drinking. You know, I have too much at stake now. I really do. Like, I have to keep this up because I'm not willing to risk everything else. And that's really how I visualize my sobriety is like spokes on a bicycle wheel, right? And I don't know how many spokes I can take out until the whole wheel collapses, right? Like one spoke is like my home group, one spoke is like a sponsor, one spoke is sponsoring, like all of these different spokes, they hold the wheel together. And every time I take one out, I am putting the integrity of that wheel at risk, you know? And I'm just not willing to do it today. I'm not willing to lose what I've built. I'm not willing to lose what I have and what I share and what you guys have taught me how to do. And I'm out. Thank you.